little bit of a different intro today. Hey, everybody, welcome back to another episode of Lunch Money with Scott and Edan, and I am Scott Schnaars.
I'm Edan Gottlib, and today we're going to jump into something that salespeople are very shy from approaching, but they shouldn't. They should be really, really good at this, and that's contract negotiations. So now we're not just talking about discounting. We're talking about the elements in the contracts that you should know and be familiar with how to negotiate.
I think that that's right because so many salespeople that I know just immediately think negotiation equals price. Like they don't even think about like other give to gets in the in the contract. They just go, oh, negotiation is price, or even worse, negotiation means I've got to get my lawyer on the phone. Or I don't know any change payment terms. Oh, I got to get my lawyer involved. But there's a whole world of things that are in an agreement, and every good salesperson can and really should be ready to talk about that. One of the things that I've always believed in as a salesperson and a sales leader is that salespeople can be way more effective if they knew more about their agreements. And I want to give a shout out to Eric Grafstrom, who's a friend and mentor of mine. And Eric would always say that 90% of the changes in an agreement are business terms. And salespeople are business people, I hope, and they should be able to know these things. So today we're going to hit on six of the big ones. So think about this episode as your contract playbook.
But one more thing, before we jump into the items we kind of listed out, there's another thing that happens that in the dynamics of the deal and the people. It's people when they get to the negotiation phase, salespeople try to rush through it. It's kind of like, oh, I'm almost at the
Mm,
finish line. I just want to get through it,
yeah.
and it should be exactly the other way around. This is what you played for to get this. I sometimes use the analogy of like you made it to the finals of the NBA or the finals of whichever sport you like. You should marvel in it. You should enjoy it. This should be the fun part. People are very, very scared and trying to rush through it. So don't stop. Enjoy. It's part of the game. It should be, this is what you played for.
Like speaking of which, like how much I love you because we're recording this during Masters Friday, and I'm missing the Masters right now. But yeah, to your point, like when you see the players in that interview, like they marvel at how great that course is and what an awesome experience it is. And you're 100% right. Like you've worked so hard to get to this. Like let's have fun with it.
And they raise their level too, because now this is the money time. And
Yeah,
really, in sales, this is the
exactly.
money time. This is really is. All
Yeah,
right,
embrace the hard.
let's dive straight into it. I think our first item is talking about price caps. Um, and they come up a lot. You see it a lot in multi-year types of deals. And um, so first of all, um, if you don't have price caps in your contract, you should introduce it. Basically, you're securing ARR growth for yourself, or MRR, whichever we like to measure. Or at least you're setting up an opportunity that comes the renewal portion. It's in the contract. You're gonna have a conversation about potentially changing or increasing the prices about it. Now, if you do have it, or if it's been produced or introduced by your customer, now here you want to watch out, because there the play is that the procurement folks on the other side are trying to put a cap on how much you can raise your prices in future years, and for any additional things that they will buy from you. So you'll get like, oh, no more than 3% annually and things as such of that nature.
And especially right now, like here we are, it's April 11th, 2025. We are in this like economic turmoil that's going on all over the world right now. I would be really careful about agreeing to any kind of price cap right now because who the hell knows what's going to happen. And if you do agree to one that's too small, you're going to box yourself into bad margins down the road. We don't know what costs are going to look like, and you might realize like you've underpriced your entire deal. You thought it was really exciting 18 or 24 months ago, and now you're losing money on it. So I would be really cautious about like how do you pick the number for any kind of price cap at this point.
Yeah, and companies, by the way, that had like a 2 to 3% price caps in the last couple of years when inflation was soaring at 7 and 8, and when you operated in Europe where the inflation some places was
Yeah.
higher and your operational costs went up, then you started eroding your own margins and hurt your financials. And so it's
Yeah.
an important aspect to do it. Um, a few tips to when you set these things up. So if you have to, if they're pushing towards it and you're trying to kind of limit that exposure. Try to connect it to things that would help either you to stay with whatever happens in the economy, things like a CPI index or some kind of a number that fits well within kind of your margin calculations. Also, the other really important thing is limited to the scope of what either they bought from you right now or the use case they're using. So for whatever they're going to buy in the future, it wouldn't be under that kind of price provision kind of limitation. It's like, this is something different. So what you have today, okay, we're not going to raise it in more than, 5%. But if you're
Yeah.
buying something new, then it's not that pricing. So don't get falling into the trap of this price cap of what they bought versus price guarantee of everything else they're going to buy. Again, which is a trap they put there for you.
Yeah, it's a great delineation. And I think that if a client does insist on a cap, like that's fine. Like, everybody's going to ask for these things and some people are going to say, oh, it's got to be this. If you're a seller, just push for as short a term as possible on that, or have a clause in there that lets you renegotiate what that looks like after year two, which is in this economy, that's probably what I would do is have that price cap be renegotiable at least every 12 to 24 months.
Yep. And we talked about negotiable. Use it as a bargaining chip. Okay. And for sometimes there are other things that are more important to you than that. I mean, because you could have in your plan that you don't really care if it's going to go up or not, but you want to put it in there and have it as part of the trade-off for other things that might be important to you. Maybe getting the money up front is more important to you for right now and it depends on kind of where you are and what's going on for you. Also, another technique is adding it as a distraction, right? There's going to be things you're going to negotiate, and they're always going to come back and forth. Just add another item to the list. So now, when at the end of the day and the end of negotiations, you give out some, they give out some, there will be something you can give out that you're fine with. And it could be played whether you give out the whole item or even you start off with okay, we guarantee not to increase the price more than 10%. 10? Are you crazy? And we're going to negotiate. We end up with the 3, but everybody's happy. But you get that as again part of the overall negotiation.
Yeah. Let's move on. This is one of my favorites, and that's limitation of liability and or indemnification, which seems to come up in every single agreement that's out there. And it's a little bit of a legal landmine, and it's the one that I swear, like every salesperson just goes like, I don't want to touch it. And I think like most salespeople think like there's a ton of risk, and there is. But the more that you understand it, the lower that risk is going to be. So it's really important that you and your team not only understand what limitation liability and indemnification are, you should also understand like this is something that every company is going to want to negotiate. Who takes on that liability? Who takes on the indemnification? And as a result, it really becomes more of a business issue than it is a legal issue.
Yeah, it's really, this is such an important item to point out. This is a business issue. It would be looking like it's a legal issue, and the legal guys will talk that it's legal. And whenever we had a few really big, complicated negotiations that it came to the wire of this item, and I'll talk in a second about. I think you have to really, really pay attention to it. And at the end of the day, you could push, and I would step in and push. Say, okay, I respect you, lawyers, but it's not your choice. It is really a business decision, because if you think about it, this is very, very dangerous. If you don't pay attention here, your company will be liable for millions. It could bankrupt your company if you set it up wrong. And by the way, it also hurts your evaluation later on because these are part of the liabilities you're taking. So when somebody is going to try to buy you or invest in you or go IPO, it will hurt you significantly. And it's an item people really are afraid of, don't understand, and you have to take front and center because it is a very dangerous kind of item.
Yeah, it's a tricky one. I think that whenever indemnification comes up, like the easy answer to that best case scenario is mutual indemnification. What that means is that you and your company are responsible for the things that you do. They're responsible for the things that they do. What you don't want to look for is you want to look at any kind of cap on liability, and you really have to make sure that that's there. The very last thing that you should put into an agreement, because to Don's point, like it could bankrupt your company, is having some type of uncapped liability. So as soon as you see uncapped liability for things like data breaches or IP violations that you can't actually control, like you have to walk away from that and you have to negotiate a lower number. And usually a high number that I've seen is 5x contract value. Typically you'll see like 1x contract value of what that liability looks like. And that's what you want to negotiate for or lower.
Yep. And this is what you want to do. You want to be able to spot these red flags, like
Yeah,
uncap red flag, and escalate it to your legals. And first you can run the first play is legal to legal, but then if it doesn't, you escalate it to business to business. Also have the context about the deal size, right? You don't give a $10 million
right.
indemnification for a $20,000, subscription fee, and you'll get there. You get into the lawyer's corner, and then you get stuck with this. So don't just, rubber stamp the red lines because you're trying to rush through the contract and you don't want to deal with this stuff and it's lawyers and it would prolong the process. If they want to make big changes from what your standard is, try to understand why. Because sometimes, it would be one or two things. Sometimes it would be, this is just the way the lawyers does it because this is their copy pasting. So there's nothing behind it other than this is kind of how we like to do it. Sometimes it's just a bluff and has nothing to do. And many times when this was an important thing and we pushed through and it was important for us because their requests were unreasonable or too risky for us to take on, it ended up that it wasn't. It was like not important to anybody else other than either the lawyer or somebody in the process or so pay attention to it. It's really, 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 really important. All right,
Yeah,
let's go to the
it's
next
terrible.
one. One that no vendor really like, which is termination clauses, and I think specifically talking about termination for convenience. So nobody likes this one. It hurts your revenue recognition. It creates a lot of anxiety and a lot of problems within your company, and it's something that you get to see a lot, that kind of a request.
Yeah, this is the classic like we can leave whenever we want, but you're locked into it. Like the real danger of it is it takes away any opportunity for you to book revenue on it. Like you have no predictable revenue if XYZ company can just get out whenever they want. And they might just wake up in the morning and decide they don't like the cut of your jib and decide that they want to get out of the agreement, and they have the right to do that if you have that in there.
Yeah, and it's, this is a little bit about your philosophy of how you do deals and how you work with your customers, right? If it's a termination for convenience on one side, I mean, nothing reciprocal. It's like this is a partnership in most cases. This is not about, a one single transaction. The whole subscription base means we have a long-term relationship working together. So as soon as this thing comes into play, you've already broken one of the fundamental elements of your relationship with your customer. Now, I know what they're coming up with, but if that's the case, you're already in trouble. You need to make investments up front and like onboarding, integrations, hardware, whatever you need to do, you need to make an investment for that to work. And as you mentioned, the convenience part, they can do whatever they want, no matter what was going on. And I think it's a very tricky place to go to because it sets up the wrong kind of a relationship for a customer to be successful and for a long-term customer.
Yeah, because like we do have these fees that and these costs that we invest in making sure that a customer is successful. So whenever I see a term for convenience clause, the first thing that I ask for is let's get rid of it. And if they're really adamant about not getting rid of it, I'll make sure that there is some kind of early termination fee that's associated with the agreement. The easiest way to do that is just say, hey, like, you would still owe us for the rest of the term of the agreement if you choose to get out of it. It's fine if you want to get out of it, but you still owe us all the money. And then that becomes the negotiation from there. But you really want to make sure that you get reimbursed for any kind of sunk cost that you might have. You could also flip the script on it and make it mutual. So that way, with either party with 30 days notice can terminate. It's not really very great for you as the seller to have that in there because you still have a lot of the risk there. But if it almost becomes like a mutually assured destruction scenario. If they see that, oh, this company can cancel whenever they want to, it's not really, to Adon's point, you're not really starting off the relationship on the best foot when you have a two-way term for convenience there, but it's something. But, I would just, ask them to take it out and explain why you can't have it there for all of the reasons we've been discussing. And 9 out of 10 times they let it go. And that one time, like make sure you get an early termination fee associated with it.
Yep. And notice periods, fees, these are all things that you really trying to install that from a money perspective, it would not make sense. As you mentioned, you still have ours for the whole year. And but here's, I think, the more important point. really, if you look at this plain, why is it there and the item? It's because at the end of the day, they're trying to mitigate a risk. They're really trying to mitigate what happens if this does not work. And I don't want to pay for stuff I'm not going to be using. So you can find other ways to mitigate that risk as part of your contract versus the early termination or the termination for convenience thing. I don't think most of the vendors would want to keep a customer that is not happy and it's not working for them. And there are other ways that you could address it. Things like, this is the contract term is for 12 months only. So you basically leave at 12 months if it's not working for you. And so you can play with those other elements in terms of like milestones and things like that are not about convenience. The problem with convenience is that it's like, I just don't like it anymore. And it's there because they're trying to mitigate the risk of, I don't know what I don't know. So I want to keep it open that way. So mitigate it by the other things, it's only a year. We're going to put a special team that's going to help you, do the onboarding, make sure you're successful. And again, as you said, the 1 out of 10, that would really be important for them, or because this is how the company does their business, make it kind of a mutual, put some fees into that, make it that money-wise, at least you will cover your cost. And if not, just, get the first year subscription. But this is not and I know there were some discussions online and on LinkedIn about vendors don't let their, customers off the hook because they kind of wanted to leave. That's not this. Don't confuse the two. This is not about I'm trying to get the customer to stick here, although I'm not delivering value. This is about early on trying to mitigate risks that I don't know what they are, and how do I set that contract to be in play.
Yeah. Let's move on to better things. Let's talk about money, and more
How about the money?
particularly
We like
payment
money.
terms.
Yes. Yes.
We do love money, so let's talk about payment terms and like when are you going to get paid on your deal?
That at 90 paid quarterly is one of the things that I really,
Who,
really
who,
hate when
who
I
was
hear.
who was the client at Cloudnary that came to us with net 90 paid quarterly? It was like the most
Yeah.
insane, batshit crazy thing I've ever heard of in my life.
Yeah. One of the lines I do like to say, especially when you get all these kind of creative payment terms, is that you got to remember you're not a bank. So if I'm financing somebody's subscription fees, they should be, if I allow it, which first order of business would be, no, we're not doing it. But let's say we get dragged into that, then it'd be just like a bank, and there should be interest involved with it and some extra fees for it. But yeah,
Yeah.
that 90 pay quarterly was the best one. And it was a real case. It was we're not making that one up.
Like I love the fact that somebody actually had the audacity to put that into an agreement and think like, yeah, let's see what we can get here. Like that's a big balls move, and I love it. I was like really happy to see that.
I know. I
That
really
was one that
appreciate it
like the
because it was fun.
salesperson was like really the salesperson very quickly was able to say no to that. But when it comes to payment terms, like the standard really should be net 30, maybe net 45 if you're feeling jealous or not jealous if you're feeling generous. Personally, I like to start with net 15 if they want net 60 or net 90. Like okay, like you could do that, but make sure you get something in return. Like Adon mentioned, interest payments. I like a upfront payment, so it's like, look, instead of paying, quarterly on something, like just pay for the whole year up front, and maybe we give you a bit of a discount, or if you pay within net 10, we'll give you 2 points off. I know a lot of companies like to do that, especially if they're holding a ton of cash. You can throw that out there to get a payment base sooner, or you put in some milestone based invoicing. So you make sure that like they have a line or they've got skin in the game on that as well.
Yep. And remember, you have to understand how important this item for your company, because there's a lot of difference. If you're strapped for cash as a company, you want the money up front because you need the money. If you don't, then you could be more generous and more flexible about negotiating this for something else, right? I give you better payment terms, and you buy more stuff, or you do a press release for me, or and even the points off, right, for money up front. You do it when it's important. When it's not, no, I would rather have the money and wait another month for it. And so just look at what is the important stuff for your company, and don't compromise here. It makes a big impact. One other point just to pay attention to is that always make sure that you know who's responsible for payment. Because a lot of times you could have, oh, we negotiated at 30, but then you go into this other process and there's other companies and some companies are buying through other companies and have third party paying for you. So you got to make sure that everything is in writing and clear in case you are not directly getting paid. The other item
Smart
I'll
one.
say to pay attention to, in some large companies or even medium companies, you'll find sometimes there's a budget cycle and spend cycle. And if you can align to that, then make the payment terms kind of based on that one. So let's say if it's the end of the year and use it or lose it kind of a case, or they have to, then you might play around differently to do certain things. But it's important to set up right, because otherwise later your teams, the renewal teams or your finance team will have to chase money instead of just getting the money get paid.
And there's also unique ones, like you just said something to Don that reminded me of a deal that I did where the company only cut checks to vendors like on the 15th of the month or
Mhm.
something like that.
Yep.
And if you sign your deal on the 20th, they're like, yeah, you can send us an invoice, but we pay net 30 from the 15th of the following month. It's like you do have to take that into consideration that now you're deferring by, you're really giving them net 45 or even net 60 at that point because of the way that they structure their payments. So it's an important one to ask about. It's a good point that we hadn't thought about.
And the tip, I mean, if you're doing a deal that is slightly larger and you have a procurement team on the other side, talk to the procurement guy. Say, hey, before we finish it up, what's important to you guys? How do you issue this? What's your cycles? Because I want to put something in the contract that works really well for you. I don't want to introduce something that, like, if this is how they do and they only pay on the 20th, I don't want to put something that you legally have to pay me on the 15th because it's going to break. So open that dialogue to make sure that everything gets smooth for you. And by the way, your champions most of the times don't know it. And so you need to go out to the procurement and just have a sync chat, say, hey, let me know what's important to you, how to set this thing up. Some companies have, we're not allowed to take anything under, net 45. Right? So they have their own kind of rules. Figure those out so you won't try to fight something and be hard. But again, negotiate it. Say, oh, I'm going to have to give you 45 because that's your thing. That means I'm going to have to, I can't give you that discount.
Man, that's just like the classic asking for the answers to the test, which is like that's my favorite way of selling.
It's
It's just like,
exactly it. It's just it's exactly this. You're asking for the answers for the test.
yeah,
All right, let's go to governing law and
yeah.
arbitration. No, let's go to government. This is a very subtle item, but it's a very important one.
Yeah, I think most companies they tend to want to have governing law in either the state or the country of their headquarters, which is super common, or they tend to agree to a more business friendly state like in Delaware or New York. But if you're a US based company and your client wants laws to be governed by German law or something crazy like that, like you should know what you're getting into. You might not have a German presence, you might not have a German attorney, you might not know what's going on there. And if you do a deal like that, like you're not just talking about like legal mumbo jumbo stuff, like it changes your risk profile when you do those things. I did a deal a few years ago and the company insisted on having it be done in German law, and we had to go hire a German attorney to help us with the agreement. And thankfully, it was a huge deal, and we were able to kind of build that into the cost. But like it's a big risk if you take on something outside of your jurisdiction.
Yeah, and you're right. It's both risk and cost. So you have to, explore the risk that you have about how these companies are operating and whether you have people or operations in these countries. And the usual defaults are, in the US, it's kind of somewhat easier, although, the states are fairly similar, but you might pick one that you like. Internationally, it becomes more complicated. And some of the first order of business when you're doing international is you pick a few things that either you have offices or you have lawyers, and you have some that are more acceptable as kind of a regular acceptable business practices. So sometimes, Britain was very acceptable, and sometimes Singapore is acceptable. And so you got to make sure though that you take that into account. The other thing I will say, watch for arbitration. Now arbitration is fast and cheap and great, but also could be opaque and complicated. So I'm a big fan of
Yeah.
arbitration. I would actually suggest that make sure that arbitration is the path to solve a problem versus legal. It helps mitigate a lot of the stuff that we talked about before. But be cautious about, again, what location, what governing law you're picking, what arbitration, because there are different methods in the world of how arbitrations are being done. So just be aware of it. But I would definitely recommend arbitration should be your default approach to, and that solves some of the governing law problems as well too.
Yeah, I'm a huge fan of arbitration, and I think and part of the reason I like it so much is as somebody who has spent most of their career working for fairly early stage startups. If you're a small company, they're a big company. That arbitration really does help to level the playing field for you. But you have to make sure it's neutral too, right? Like if I have to go do arbitration in Singapore or in Latvia, like that's going to get crazy. So like make sure that everybody agrees on where that arbitration is going to happen and what governing laws are going to be for that. So I
And
think
by the
that
way,
that's it for yeah.
you can get away a lot with this story you just told about, we're a young company or we're a startup versus the big giants and say, so we, all we do is arbitration and all we do it is in Silicon Valley or in New York so that negotiating technique works really, really well. You'd be surprised how much, even against huge giants in Germany, or pick whatever. But as I can recall directly one that we did with Germany, a huge giant that there would be like German law is the only law. We're like, hey, we're a young company. We're smaller than you. We can't just afford to do that, and our technology is so great. And let's agree that we're friends, and we'll do it this way. And they compromised.
Yeah. So let's close with a juicy one, and that's performance guarantees. Yeah.
Yeah. This is very tempting to promise to get a deal done. And again, we talked about at the beginning about rushing through and trying to close things. It's like, oh, sure, we'll do this by, in 2 months, you're going to make gazillions of dollars and the results are going to be amazing. And I can guarantee it in the contract. If not, you could, sue me, leave me, whatever it is. So it's very
God,
tempting.
yeah, it's super tempting, but you're never going to hit those goals. And what's going to happen is you're going to spend the next year in customer success hell, or like even worse, you're going to get sued for misrepresenting what you're going to be able to do and by when. Ugh.
And, this is really going back to risk mitigation. So if they brought it up, right, so they're trying to mitigate the risk of this is not going to work, right, kind of a thing. So if it's must and it's part of their operating, make sure that the language in your contracts is more about commercially reasonable efforts and, stick with your SLAs and kind of play those lanes to try and have that in the process to mitigate that risk. But make sure that whatever is measured is something that you truly have, under control. It's not that, oh, if I fix this, then there's 7 other things that will happen until your website's load, so I can't
Yeah.
make it faster or things like that. So make sure you do this. The other way to mitigate that risk for them is about having a well thought out plan of deployment. It's okay, we know the technology works. We know that if we do these things, you're going to get live, and that this is what's going to happen. And so just swap it with having a better implementation plan that is agreed and everybody understands as the means to. It's not part of the contract. It's part of what we're going to be doing together. But this is kind of your feeling assurance that this is going to work. We have a plan that we believe in. So it doesn't have to be the contract. But this is a different way to mitigate the that need of like, what happens if it doesn't work? The other ways to do it when it doesn't work is you term it better. You say, you know what? Just sign up for 1 year, right? It's going to be a 4 months implementation anyhow, right? And to get the results, another 4 months. So you're already like, 8, 9, 10 months in. So for the 2 months that maybe the 2% chance that this is not going to work, it's a risk you could take. We don't need to go legal language over that one. So mitigate that risk for them in their language, and again with a solid plan, you could avoid needing to put this in the contract. But if you do, go commercially reasonable, go with KPIs you can control.
Yeah, and never ever tie payment to some crazy ambiguous performance goal there. Like unless you have full control over that outfit or that output rather, like don't ever tie payment to something like that. That'll just get you into even more trouble.
Yeah. If people pushed me, and I can tell you that so far, probably have done it hundreds of times, and it worked hundreds of times. If they push for pay for performance, then you say, okay, so I want to cut off the benefits. And so if I'm telling you that you're going to make, 40 points margins more, then I want 10 points of this margin. And maybe it would work and people will get excited and you start getting some traction with your champions, maybe even legal. You hit the CFO, he's going to say, no, 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 I'm not sharing any of my money with you.
Right.
And so it would never survive. So but you can run that play. Say, you know what, guys, let's share the profits.
Yeah.
And so it's never going to kind of happen there. Good. I think we covered the six.
We
I
did.
think you got a good starter kit here to negotiate. This is really just a starter kit. Every one of them has some, a lot of nuances and techniques to play around. They're all very important. We're not saying you need to be a lawyer, and we don't think you want to be a lawyer, but you do need to be a business person, and you need to truly understand everything that's going on there. And some of the languages are very similar, and you just need to learn the language, and that's it. And so you can identify red flags and you can manage. But you're a business guy. You're a business person. No matter, by the way, if you're an AE or you're an account manager or you're a solution engineer, we're all business people, and you have to understand these things.
We want you to know enough to protect your company. We want you to know enough to cover yourself. But if you have doubt, like don't fake it. Bring in your lawyer. Bring them in early to the discussions. I like Don's idea of just asking for the answers to the test. I think that will make you a better, more productive salesperson than just as soon as you see a red line on an agreement, you're flipping it over the fence to your attorney and wasting their time on things that might be business issues.
Yep. So that's it for today. You liked it? If you like the episodes, give us a like, give us a shout. We are enjoying doing it. So give us any feedback that you guys have. Anything to say, Scott?
Love it. We'll see you next time on Lunch Money. Thanks, everybody.
All right.